Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, we're ready for another podcast where I get to talk with an accessibility practitioner. And today I am pleased to be speaking with Joanne Lastort. Hello, Joanne, how are you today?
I am terrific, thank you.
Well, I'm talking from my home office on Vashon Island, which is near Blink's headquarters in Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
All the way on the other side of the country. I live in Tacoma Park, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. I am in my corner office as well, and I look out onto a state park, so I'm enjoying all the leaves changing colors right now.
Very nice. And so is that in Maryland then?
Yes, on the Maryland side.
Well, it's great to be able to have this chance to chat with you, and a good place always to start is just for you to briefly introduce where you're working at, what types of things you're involved with today.
I work for Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a huge company and worldwide. I currently am working on a contract for the Department of Labor. We set up their Section 508 program office. They're a big agency, and within the agency, there are multiple smaller ones like OSHA, most people know. There's one for veterans, Women's Bureau, multiple things. Compliance, for contractors to the government, they have to follow their rules. So there's about 26 smaller agencies. Mm-hmm. So it's a big job being the program office for all of them.
I mean, Booz Allen Hamilton certainly is a really large consulting and contracting organization. Is your work as an accessibility specialist, is that represented within Booz Allen Hamilton, or is that something that you specifically got involved in for the Department of Labor project work?
I'm part of the Booz Allen Section 508 team. It's fairly small. We don't do a lot of work inside the company. We mostly work with federal agencies like the Veterans Administration, HHS, which is, Human Services, Health and Human Services. Those are the primary agencies that we work with. We've done a little bit of work with the CDC since COVID, not as much with accessibility with them yet, though.
All right, well, we can dig in a little bit more to what things you're involved with today. But one of the things, main purposes of this is to follow people's journeys that brought them to working in accessibility today, and so we could do that here as well. Why don't you just kind of take me back in time, and where would you like to kind of start your story of where accessibility was something that you began thinking about?
I'm going to go even farther back to my first career. I studied in Paris classical French cooking, and I majored in pastry. I came back and worked as a professional pastry chef for many years in Washington, D.C. And then I had an accident that ended my career. I lost about 20% of the use of my right hand, and I'm right-handed. So I spent about a year as a one-handed person. So I had a little bit of an experience as someone with a disability. And I was lucky enough that I met my husband, who is in IT, and he got me into that. And it's actually more similar to cooking than you might think, in that as a pastry chef, everything is very detailed, has to be exactly the right amount, the right temperature, in the right order, which is a lot like development when you're coding. And I was doing that for a long time and was sort of feeling like I wasn't really making a big difference in the world. And then I discovered accessibility. I discovered Jim Thatcher's website and immediately was interested not only in obviously helping people, which I could certainly relate to, not having a job for a year, that it's very important, at least in American society, to have a job. It sort of helps people to find themselves. And also that, it's a challenge to your creativity. You have to be able to imagine how other people are going to experience the world. And it's a challenge to make sure that you're including everyone and thinking about all those different ways that people can be experiencing the world. So it just satisfies me on all levels.
Well, before you discovered the kind of the practice or profession of accessibility, after you'd had your accident, what type of like resources were available to you at the time, just to be able to cope with what must have been a very significant and difficult adjustment?
There wasn't anything. This was back in, and gosh, I'm dating myself now, back in '88. So there wasn't really even a lot of IT around, at least not, on a personal computer sort of level. And there really wasn't much I could find for a one-handed person to do. I couldn't teach cooking because I couldn't demonstrate it. And it was devastating. And I, for the longest time, didn't know what to do. So I got unemployment and disability and did a lot of physical therapy so that I can sort of use a mouse, but I'm primarily a keyboard user. So I still have a disability. Yeah.
And so then how did things change for you in lived life and work life as you just as accessibility started to become a little bit more available?
Well, it was very helpful once things like voice command software like Dragon Naturally Speaking came out. I use that if I'm going to be doing a lot of typing, because again, I still only have 80% of the use of my right hand, so typing isn't really easy as well. So but the more I explored the different options, the more I was getting more and more excited, and then I was realizing, okay, well, there's more even than voice command. That you have text to speech, and now you have voice command like Alexa, so you don't even have to use any sort of interface other than your voice. So things are they're coming along, and it's getting very exciting. One of my side projects is with XR Access, which is a nonprofit that is working with AR and VR and XR, essentially, trying to make sure that the standards for it are going to be inclusive, especially because it's so visual right now, but it can encompass all of your senses. We have haptics coming, and obviously there's audio as well. And it's a really, really interesting group of people to be working with, to be trying to influence it. So what happened with the internet doesn't happen with virtual reality as well, because the internet just opened up the whole world, but then if it's not accessible, it doesn't help.
Well, so we had, as you discovered accessibility and started to become building your the IT part of your career, then what was that stage like? How did you start finding your way into specializing in accessibility activities?
I was very pushy because I knew about it. And then when companies that I was working for, I'd been a consultant my entire career, I'd start saying, well, does this work only with the keyboard? Because since I'm primarily a keyboard user, it was easy for me to start harassing people about making things more accessible with the keyboard. And then I was lucky enough to get a job for the IRS, again, as a consultant. And the person who hired me said she did it because I used to be a pastry chef, because they're so detail oriented. So it was interesting how the past influenced the future. And I got a lot of experience with testing at the IRS, and also with the standards themselves, figuring out which ones were applicable for each contract, because all the procurement contracts had to go through the department there. And then you had to make sure that the right language is in there. And so I got really into the standards before they were refreshed. And then I went on from there to the FCC, did a lot more testing for them, and then finally wound up at Booz Allen Hamilton and the Department of Labor.
Well, I mean, you just looking at the things with the IRS. I mean, there you have constituency, of customers or citizens, or however you refer to that is everyone. It's about the widest demographic that it could possibly be, and so that must have really provided a lot of weight to the work that you needed to do for that support.
Yeah, it was fascinating, really was. I didn't get to deal with the public directly, but everything I did influenced that, because obviously they have to buy as conformant software as possible, and they have to make sure that all of their applications are accessible. I was there when they rolled out the ACA, and it was a 508 disaster. So I was working next to some consultants that were trying desperately to fix that program. And yeah, if they'd only started in the beginning with accessibility.
Well, isn't that always the case? So in your time, working with the government, have you found that there's been any move to shift left to getting accessibility involved in research and design before all the code is executed?
Slowly but surely. The government does not move quickly, but they have established the U.S. Web Design, which actually the 20th Century Idea Act requires government agencies that are building new software to use, and it's accessible and has all the components and everything you could need. So they're working their way there. The most progress I think I've made in my career is at Department of Labor. When I started, there was no Section 508 program office at all. And each small agency that like I mentioned, sort of had their own way of doing or not doing it at all. So there was no cohesive guidance, and it was right after the refresh had been made legal, in that, okay, they've passed it, and then you have, a year in which to start conforming to it. So it was 2018. So it had come due that people would have to start conforming to it. And so, of course, none of the agencies were even caught up to that. They were still using the old standards, and we've come a very long way.
Well, something like the Department of Labor is probably one of the biggest departments in the world, if you want to use the term department. I imagine there's just so many different things going on. Does the work that do you serve, broadly across different activities or divisions within that, or do you do consulting within, or are you tied to specific activities?
Well, we're just growing. We formally created the department, or stood up the department, June of last year, and we're a small team. But what we decided to do, as far as doing in stages, start with training and awareness. If people don't know about it, they're not even going to start with it, much less worry about it even at the end. So our main focus has been training and outreach. So first, we decided to work on documentation because everybody produces documents and lots of them. So once we had established a central office and central guidance for all the agencies to follow, then we started in developing training and then a document accessibility program, which takes a person from nothing to actually being able to remediate a PDF. And that includes, learning about how to use color accessibly if you can't see color at all, or if you are colorblind, to how to write alt text. So going from nothing all the way to full-blown being able to create an accessible document. And we were lucky enough to get buy-in from the secretary. So once you have that, then you're good, because otherwise people are like, I don't feel like it.
Yeah, and I know in a lot of organizations, government and otherwise, that the content publishing system that might be in place a lot of times ends up, limiting the opportunities, for accessibility. How did that work in your experience at the Department of Labor?
They don't particularly have one. Again, a lot of things are sort of diffuse. One agency has this, another one has that, but they all use Microsoft Office and they all have Acrobat. So we started at the very beginning, and you'd be surprised how many people don't even really know how to use Word. So you're not only teaching them how to make it accessible in Word, you're teaching them how to use Word, which was not where I figured I would be starting. So I've had to become an expert in Word and PowerPoint and Captivate and Excel and all that, just on top of doing accessibility. One thing.
And so, I imagine, that had to do with, making sure there's the use of headings and things like that, so it would carry through into the PDFs.
Yes, so styles and tables, and the hardest part is actually figuring out what is going to motivate someone, and it's different for everyone. So I've come up with a lot of different approaches, starting with analogies. And this, again, will go back to my pastry chef beginnings. I describe accessibility as the baking powder. So you can certainly make blueberry muffins, and if you forget to put the blueberries in, you can kind of throw them in at the end and mix them a little. But you can't do that with baking powder. You can't add that at the end. And if it's not in there, it's not going to work. And that resonates actually with a lot of people, and clicks with them enough that they remember, oh, okay, we have to do accessibility at the beginning. We can't just, sprinkle it on at the end. And that's really the key, because you don't want to be doing remediation. That's rework. If you do it right the first time, you have a quality product. It works for everybody, therefore it works. And doing it at the end is just not going to work. Even if you can make it work, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be expensive. It's going to meet all those myths that there are about accessibility, that, it's hard to do and it's expensive and it's ugly. It's like, not if you do it in the beginning.
And would you set up templates, or were they open to having templates, or did they do that within individual offices, or is everybody pretty much just had to do the training and take care of their own little corner of the work?
We're trying to empower everyone to do their own. We don't really have enough people to remediate everyone's documents for them, and they need to be able to do them on their own. So it's been mostly that, and we've just started expanding out into the development arena and the design arena. Again, because we're such a small group of people, we just went with documents first to make the biggest bang for the buck.
I imagine it's a big effort just to get people to understand that the changes really need to be made in that source document before it goes to PDF as opposed to trying to, fix it later on.
Definitely. Once you get to PDF, that format is pretty much locked down. So I love analogies. My description to people is, okay, your Word document or PowerPoint or whatever is like a clay sculpture. The PDF is going to be the bronze version. So if you have to fix something, you're going to have to be melting part of that bronze statue to fix it. And that's a lot more difficult.
Well, you've been working in that area for a while. Are there any certain initiatives you have going on, or things that you're passionate about or looking forward to for improvements as you continue on in that area?
I'm mostly looking forward to the VR and the AR. That's going to be challenging and exciting. And the most interesting part to me is that it's going to start bringing in the physical world, because you're going to have to make sure you're designing things where people don't have to turn their heads or be standing or have two hands necessarily for those controllers. And, maybe they have to be able to do it to be seated. So there's a lot of intersection that's going to be happening that I think is going to be fascinating.
Well, being in a government organization like you are you able to leverage any activities going on in any of the other parts of the government departments? Are there any kind of cross-departmental resources, or do you just have to make your own network connections to share ideas and things?
The GSA has the section 508.gov website. And while the Access Board is the one that's responsible for creating the standards, or as they did, incorporating the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are international, the GSA is responsible for helping people actually implement them. So that's a great resource for a lot of different areas, specifically government. So they have a procurement section, they have a development section, a training section, testing, and everything. So it's a really good resource. However, each agency, of course, likes their own spin on things. So it's a good base resource, but I found I've had to tailor a lot of the messaging specifically for Department of Labor.
Like, at the very start of our discussion, you were talking about how much audio input was able to change things for you, improve your work life a bit. Just it's expanded so much just in the past few years of what's available. What are your thoughts about that moving forward, separate from the VR and AR space? Do you see where it's going to continue to have more opportunities for improvement, or do you think the tool set is pretty much optimized for what a mobility impairment would need right now?
I know that unfortunately Dragon, naturally speaking, is not supporting the product as much as they have. And Freedom Scientific, which makes JAWS, which is a screen reader, has started incorporating voice commands there, which I think is very interesting. Just sort of like Alexa. So someone who's using a screen reader can say, open a file, and it will open. So I like the combination of those two worlds coming up. And I think the whole remote work situation is really going to open some doors for people, because now your disability is invisible. If you're in a wheelchair, no one's going to see. They may not know if you're using a screen reader or a screen magnifier, and you don't have to leave your house and deal with all that. So I'm really, really hopeful that the remote work will open up a lot of doors for people. because it is hard trying to get a job with a disability. I mean, some people will just look at you and assume you don't know what you're doing, or, so you get rid of some of that upfront stigma.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating insight. I'd never really thought about that. Obviously, the world has changed in the past 18 months in how much we are doing remote work, and I'd never even thought about just the idea that the Zooming and remote work, has that potential to remove that stigma, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So I'm very, very hopeful about that. People
Well,
tend to think, disability equals inability, and that is totally opposite. Most people with a disability are innovators. They have to be, just to do day-to-day things. They have to figure out a way to do it. And it's so valuable to have, exposure to people who do things differently. It's very important that we get that.
It's been great to chat with you and hear about your experiences in this area. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that, and hopefully we can meet up in the real world at some time.
That would be terrific.